Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Nadorff. I'm from the Department of Psychology. Our department is very pleased to be part of this year's Start Full Stride event, and as part of that, we are bringing you a video on sleep and the importance of sleep, and specifically different strategies to help you get better sleep over time. This video is presented by Ms. Courtney Bolstead, who is one of the doctoral students in our department. And one of the things I really like about her presentation is that not only does she go over the recommendations that have been presented, but she also goes over some of the science and reason behind it to help you understand not only what you should and should not do, but the reason behind it and the reason why we recommend these things. So I hope you find this to be enjoyable, educational, and hopefully helpful.
Hey, my name's Courtney. Today I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks with you to help improve your sleep. Let's first start by learning a little bit about two different processes that help us sleep: the homeostatic sleep drive and our circadian rhythms.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your circadian rhythm and homeostatic sleep drive. First, let's get our graph set up with time on our x-axis. Let's do 2 a.m., 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 8 p.m. And you can just kind of envision that as you get to the end here, it's going to start back over at 2 a.m. And then on our y-axis, we're going to put alertness, with higher scores being more alert and lower being more tired. Okay, let's start first by looking at the circadian rhythm. Now, the circadian rhythm has two peaks throughout the day and two valleys. And typically when I ask people to guess where one of the valleys are, they tell me right around 2 p.m. And I say, guess what? You're right. So naturally we have a valley or a low point in our day at about 2 p.m., maybe right after lunch. Given that I've set this graph up to be fairly symmetrical, our other valley is actually at 2 a.m. And naturally that means our peaks are going to be at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So throughout the day, the circadian rhythm kind of goes up and down, impacting your alertness throughout the day. So if you were to wake up around 8 a.m., that's going to be peak alertness. And then as you go throughout your day, you're going to slowly feel maybe more tired, especially around 2 p.m. when you hit that first valley. But naturally, if you push through the 2 p.m. slump, you might start to feel a little bit more alert as your circadian rhythm goes back up. And this is going to peak maybe around 8 p.m. and then decrease while you get ready for bed, go to bed, before it starts to go back up around 2 a.m. So this circadian rhythm is fairly typical. It can shift either maybe a little bit later in the day or earlier in the day, just depending on individual differences. Next, let's talk about the second factor that drives your sleep, and that's the homeostatic sleep drive. The homeostatic sleep drive can almost be thought of like a battery that you can recharge, and it recharges when you're asleep and it depletes while you're awake. It can also be thought of as kind of an urge to sleep or a need for sleep or like a sleep hunger. So let's take a look at your homeostatic sleep drive. Like I said, this is going to recharge as you sleep and deplete throughout the day while you're awake. So let's say, for simplicity's sake, that you got up at 8 a.m. Right here is where you're going to have a fully charged homeostatic sleep drive. And it's going to slowly deplete as you go about your day, maybe just going to school or going to work, maybe exercising a little bit, until you get down to the end of the day and it's very, very low. And maybe you go to bed at 10 p.m. And then you're asleep at night, so then it's going to recharge back to peak fullness for you to then wake up in the morning. So some things that can influence the homeostatic sleep drive are things that we'll get into in later tips. Two big ones that come to mind are caffeine and napping. So say right around 2 p.m. you're feeling kind of low with your circadian rhythm kind of influencing you there, and your homeostatic sleep drive has depleted quite a bit. Maybe you decide to maybe take a nap. So you plug back in or charge your homeostatic sleep drive for a nap. And you wake up maybe an hour or two later, and then your homeostatic sleep drive is going to start to deplete again. But you can see it's going to deplete at the same rate that it was depleting before you took the nap, except now it's going to be delayed later into the night. So you may be not tired for bed until maybe 2 or 12 a.m., where before you were going to bed at 10 p.m. And again, that's going to plug back in as you sleep. The same thing could also happen maybe if you're consuming caffeine around the 2 p.m. slump, or really any point during the day where it can impact your homeostatic sleep drive. So there you have it. We have our homeostatic sleep drive in blue and our circadian rhythm in red. So 2 factors that are going to affect your sleep.
Now that you know what the circadian rhythm and homeostatic sleep drive are, let's get into some tips and tricks that will help you sleep better. These tips and tricks are called sleep hygiene, and just like personal hygiene, they're meant to clean up your sleep. Just like anything you want to change, first you have to know where to start. So my first tip is for you to start tracking your sleep. Some people wear smartwatches that do this for them. Otherwise, you can just do it with a pen and paper. You'll need to track the time that you go to sleep each night, the time that you wake up each day, and then track how long you are actually asleep per night. Another cool thing to track is how much time you're spending in bed, whether you're awake or asleep. This will be important later. Also remember to track any naps that you have throughout the day. Just the sheer tracking of your sleep can be one strategy to actually improve your sleep. Sometimes people find that when they start tracking, they've brought their awareness to their sleep or whatever other behavior they're trying to change, and this can actually provide motivation and inclination to change that behavior. So step 1, track your sleep. My second tip has to start in the morning. This has to do with your wake-up time. It's important to get up at about the same time every single day of the week. Yes, even weekends. To do this, take a look at the earliest time that you need to be up throughout your weeks, and that will be your new get-up time every day, even when you don't have to get up that early. My third tip is to sleep only as much as you need to feel refreshed. Typically for adults, this number will fall between 7 and 9 hours of sleep per night. Personally, for me, I know my sweet spot is 7.5 hours. Anything more or anything less, and I'm just too tired. So I aim to get, on average, 7.5 hours of sleep each night. My fourth tip is to introduce bright light in the mornings after you've woken up. You can do this by going for a morning walk or sitting by a sunny window. This bright light will tell your brain that it's time to wake up, setting your circadian rhythm. My fifth tip is to eliminate napping. If you take a nap during the day, this is going to recharge your homeostatic sleep drive, making you less likely to feel tired later in the evening when it's bedtime. My sixth tip is to exercise regularly and at least 4 hours before bedtime. Exercising regularly helps deplete your homeostatic sleep drive, increasing your need for sleep come bedtime. Getting plenty of exercise can also be helpful in reducing levels of cortisol, which relates to stress. We recommend finishing your exercise at least 4 hours before bedtime because while you work out, you're using your sympathetic nervous system or your fight or flight sense. By reducing exercise close to bedtime, you allow your body to adjust to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest system. My seventh tip is to reduce substance use that can affect sleep. 3 substances come to mind to try and reduce. The first is caffeine. I love my morning cup of coffee, but typically we recommend limiting caffeine use after about 2 p.m. If you consume caffeine later in the day, this could increase your wakefulness come bedtime. The second substance that we recommend reducing, especially in the evenings, is nicotine. Nicotine is a stimulant which can increase your wakefulness, so try and reduce that in the evenings and around bedtime. The third substance that may affect your sleep is alcohol. Often consuming alcohol can promote sleepiness and falling asleep, but can actually affect your sleep later in the night, causing awakenings. By reducing caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol, especially later in the day, you may see better sleep. My 8th tip has to do with creating a sleep sanctuary. To do this, make sure that your bed, sheets, blankets, and pillows are comfortable. Also, adjust the thermostat to a temperature that you love to sleep in. Also, cut out any distractions, light, or noises. To do this, you can use room darkening curtains or a white noise machine. My 9th tip is to not go to bed hungry. Doing so may make it harder to fall asleep or cause awakenings while you sleep. So have a light bedtime snack right before bed if you're feeling hungry. My 10th tip is to limit fluids later in the evening and right before bed. If you consume a lot of drinks right before bed, you may need to get up and use the bathroom throughout the night, thus causing an awakening. So try and reduce the amount of liquids that you consume later in the evenings. My next tip is to reduce your use of screens before bedtime. This includes your smartphone, laptop, and TV. The bright light coming from these screens acts as a signal to your brain to be awake. It's just like the sun. I recommend cutting these screens 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime to improve your sleep. If you absolutely need to use these devices before bed, try using a night shift mode or a yellow toned screen to cut out the blue light that influences your circadian rhythm. My next tip is to dim all lights before bedtime. Try turning off bright overhead lights and turning on a lamp instead. My next tip is to establish a pre-sleep activity. One of my favorite pre-sleep activities is reading. This doesn't involve any screens, and it's usually not that stimulating. I recommend doing your pre-sleep activity outside of your bed and outside of your bedroom if at all possible. My next tip is to use relaxation techniques to decrease arousal before bedtime. Things like deep breathing, guided meditations, or progressive muscle relaxation can help promote parasympathetic nervous system engagement, which is very conducive to sleep. My next tip is to use your bed only to sleep. Just like Pavlov's dogs would salivate at the sound of a bell, we can train our brains to be sleepy when we get into bed. But this only works if you pair the bed with sleep. If you're pairing your bed with wakeful activities like watching TV, reading, eating, or anything else that you could do in bed, your mind is not going to have that connection. The only exception to this recommendation is sexual activity. My next tip is to move your clock out of sight. Having time pressure to fall asleep is not conducive to falling asleep. So make sure your clock is turned away from you, or even better, out of reach altogether. My last tip is to not force it. The harder you try to fall asleep, the less likely you are to actually fall asleep. So if you aren't sleepy or it's just not happening for you, try and get out of bed, or better yet, out of your bedroom, go do some mundane task like reading or listening to a podcast until you really are sleepy. Then return to bed and just relax. Don't force it. Those were all my sleep hygiene tips. I hope you find these helpful and that you're sleeping better soon.